Welcome back to the podcaster's journey. My name is Kaleb, and in today's episode, we're going to be talking about creativity. If you are anything like me, and if you've tried to create things, some days it is, just like an avalanche of ideas. You can't keep up with them, and you don't even have enough time to bring them all into real life from your idea bank and from your mind. And then other days, maybe when it counts or when you're actually trying to push the project forward, you don't have any ideas and it's a completely dry well. So if you can relate to that, we're going to dive into some of that kind of stuff today in the podcast episode. And so I just want to invite you along for the journey while we talk about the psychology of creativity. So where does creativity come from? For me, as a Christian, I believe that God created all of the universe. And so as the original creator and then making mankind in his image, we are made in the image of God. And so we get our creativity from God. It's our extension of God's being and his desire to create and do that from a place of love, to share his creation with other people and other things and other beings. And so we as image bearers of God, I believe that's where we get our spark of creativity and where we get our desire to be creative. So that's kind of where I think comes from. And it is a little bit of a soapbox for me, guys, when I hear people say that they aren't creative, or especially for me in my week-to-week work with piano students, I hear it a lot where people are like, oh, I'd love to play the piano, but I'm just not creative. Music just isn't my thing. And while that may be true, that the music might not be your thing, I don't want you to cut yourself down and say, I'm not creative at all. I don't have what it takes to be creative, because I believe that we all have a creative spark within us. And I think we can do specific things to align ourselves to access that creativity a little more. And if we're constantly speaking into existence and sharing that we're not creative and that we couldn't do those kinds of things, I think we become a self-fulfilling prophecy. So I'll get down off my soapbox there, but I think everybody is creative, and I want to encourage you, if you're struggling with that, to really lean in and find ways that you are creative, because I think everybody has a way that they are creative. So let's talk about what motivates our creativity. I like to think about things in an organized fashion and try to zoom out and see them, see the patterns that can be made. And so I think in creativity, it can be organized into two camps. It can be organized into an intrinsic motivation motor and an extrinsic motor for motivation. And when I was in college studying music and dreaming of becoming a pop superstar someday with music, I was dreaming with that extrinsic motivation. I was dreaming of the accolades and the vanity metrics that would bolster my ego. And as I delved more in the last, 10 to 14 years, as I've delved more into the realm of art and creativity, it just seems to me that, yes, there is a place for extrinsic motivation, but if you're trying to create lasting art and be creative in a way that's going to impact others in a timeless manner, I think you have to really have a good handle on your intrinsic motivation motor. And so I guess to start, I want us to think about why we're trying to be creative and tap into that. For me, with this podcast, it is that I want to help other people. As I've dove into my why I want to create music, why I want to create art, why I want to just do the things that I want to do in life, it seems to always continue to come back to this experience and this encounter where I just realized that I get a lot of energy and joy from helping other people. And I've always wanted to inspire other people. So all that to say, as I've been, as the evolution of my journey has progressed from being in college and wanting to just use art and creativity as a means to the end to create fame and wealth for myself, to now where I'm realizing yes, I still enjoy making music and being creative, but now I don't look at it as a way to serve me. I look at it as a way to bless others and to enrich their lives. And so my intrinsic motivation has become that I want to inspire other people to live out their dreams and to live out the lives that they want to live. As I was transitioning out of college and moving into the real world, I just started to see a lot of people kind of have their soul sucked out of their life, where they were living in a place and living life in a way that they weren't excited about life. Monday is a drudgery. The weekend is kind of what people tend to live for. And I'd hear a lot really often, people would say, man, it's so cool that you're brave enough to follow your dream, to move to Nashville, to try to pursue this songwriting thing. And so as I continue to be exposed to those kinds of thoughts and people saying those kinds of things to me, I realized that a lot of people aren't living out their dreams and they're not living from a place of creativity. And so that is kind of my why and my intrinsic motivation, is that I realized that and I was like, I want to develop music. I want to develop any kind of medium podcast that is going to serve the mission of blessing other people and building them up and inspiring them in their dreams and in their life. And so, as I was preparing, I was kind of hard on the extrinsic motivators, fame and wealth and these sort of things, and using creativity to meet an end. But I think as I've been thinking about it and preparing for this episode, the conversation I want to start is that I think intrinsic motivation, I think that is the more powerful and strong motor that you're going to want to develop for yourself and your creativity. That would be my argument. But I think there's still a place and an important role for extrinsic motivation. And we'll talk about it more later, but things like deadlines and stuff like that, I think those have a strong place in our creativity and how they can help us drive ahead and kind of be the fodder, so to speak, to build a hot enough fire to really ignite that intrinsic motivation. So let's talk about some common barriers to creating. Some common barriers to creating are going to be things like fear of failure. That's for sure a big one. Fear of rejection, fear of not being good enough. Imposter syndrome, I think, falls into this. And I think this is why it's so crucial to start with our motivation and build that intrinsic motivation from the beginning and figure out what that is. Because I think if we understand my philosophy or my argument, I guess you could say, is that if you understand your why really well, if you understand your intrinsic motivation really well, I think that some of these things are going to just kind of slough off. You're not going to be so worried about rejection. You're not going to be so worried about not being good enough, or maybe even the fear of failure, I think, is going to still be there. And the reason I say that is because as a classically trained pianist and for the things that I've accomplished in my music career, I still have fear of failure when it comes to preparing a program or learning new music, that sort of stuff. So I think there's always going to be a healthy amount of fear of failure. It's just going to be learning to deal with that and be okay with potentially failing. But these other things like the fear of rejection, fear of not being good enough, etc., I think those become less and less if we really understand our why and we really understand this intrinsic motivation, because we're not doing it to be accepted by other people. I'm not doing this podcast to gain anything from anybody other than to help other people and to just try to inspire other people. So that takes a lot of weight off of my shoulders, that people aren't going to like this podcast, or that it's not going to be good enough, because I'm on a journey and I'm real with that. I know that. I've shared that with you guys. And so I don't have to worry about that. It's taken that fear away from me. So that's just one point or one proof maybe for you guys to understand why it's so important to understand your why and to build from there. Let's talk about another thing that blocks are creating, and that is creative blocks. Creative blocks happen to everybody, and we talked about this at the beginning, where you get flooded with ideas, and then when it comes down to sitting there with the blank page in front of you, with the cursor blinking, and everything just goes blank. Whether you're feeling stuck And I just want to say the key to this is to push through. But again, you're going to need that intrinsic motivation to know why you're going to push through. But I think sometimes you're going to need extrinsic motivation. This is where, as I was thinking through these two different motors, I was thinking, why do we need both? And this is where I think having that extrinsic motor is going to help. Because sometimes your intrinsic motor, maybe you don't have it developed enough, and you just need some goals that you're going to get through. Maybe you're going to record, 15 podcast episodes before you reevaluate where you're at with your podcast. Maybe you're going to edit 10 or 20 episodes of your podcast before you decide this is too challenging and I don't know what I'm doing. So setting some extrinsic goals that don't have anything to do with your why, but they kind of set out a framework for you to work within, I think is helpful. And this is just, one way to showcase that. As you're working with your creative blocks, a great tool to help you overcome that, I've found for myself, is AI. I've used ChatGPT so much over the last 6 to 8 months as I've been developing a lot of these things. And at the start, I was really concerned about that and like, should I be using this? Should I be doing this? Is this cheapening my work? And I will tell you guys that I got to the place where I was like, you know what? I don't think it's any different for me to use ChatGPT on my team to help me build some of these resources and to build some of these outlines and all this sort of stuff than it would be if I paid somebody to copyright or somebody as maybe marketing help. In any of these positions, I would pay somebody else for their expertise. And so I think there's responsible ways you can use AI to help you make your job easier and to help you overcome some of these creative blocks. I will say in the last 6 to 8 months that I've been using AI, at the start, I was just trying to, kind of use principles from like the StoryBrand framework. What other principles was I using? I think that was the big one. So I was trying to use that and just kind of let AI kind of develop everything from there. But what I've found as I've continued to use AI is it works a lot better as a brainstorming tool rather than the end-all be-all. So rather than allowing AI to write the whole script or the whole outline for the podcast, it works a lot better, and I think it will showcase a lot better to your audience that it's true to form if I create something maybe like 50 to 80% of the outline myself, 50 to 80% of the outline, and then submit that to ChatGPT and ask ChatGPT to kind of help me refine it. In my podcasting cohort that I'm doing right now, that's kind of what I've been doing. I've been developing an outline for what I want to share to my group each week, and then I'm using an AI to help me brainstorm and create the slides that go along with it. And then I go back in and I fill out the slides with my notes and exactly what I want to say with each one and edit some of the slides so that they fit a little more closely with what I'm trying to share and teach. And so I think AI can help us a lot overcome these creative blocks, but I just want to encourage you to still have a brain and still use it when you're using AI. The temptation is when it's right there is I don't even have to do it. ChatGPT can do it all, but I think you can get a lot better result if you think first and let ChatGPT help you brainstorm rather than let Chat think for you completely. Just another small soapbox, definitely going on there a little bit. But another thing that can block us, let's move on to the last thing that can block us in our common barriers to creating, and that's perfectionism. This is something that I have dealt with extensively in my own work and in my own life. And I want to just share a story to kind of drive home this point that perfectionism will kill creativity. And that it's really about embracing the imperfection and just starting and just moving forward. So the story I want to share about this is that I have a mentor. Her name is Daisy. She's a fantastic artist, and she's been in my life for probably 7 years now or so, 6, 7 years, somewhere around there. And she's always got great insight to provide to me in the realm of art and creativity. And in 2020, I believe it was 2020, I was releasing my first single that I'd released in probably 6 or 7 years at the time. And I wanted it to be absolutely perfect. I wanted it to be amazing. I hadn't released any music since I'd been in college in like 2012. So maybe it was closer to 8 years. And I was like, this has to be big. This is my first time kind of releasing things, and I've been quiet for many years in my music. I want this to be amazing. It has to be perfect. And so I kept pushing back the release date. I kept making it ambiguous and vague, and just reworking the mix, rehashing things out, rehashing the arrangement, and going back and forth on things. And I would share arrangements with Daisy from time to time. And, one time she pulled me aside there towards the end of it. And we were outside on my parents' driveway, and there was a bush there on the driveway. And I remember Daisy asking me to look at the bush and asking me how the leaves looked. She's like, do the leaves look perfect? Do they look really good? And I was like, yeah, they look great. It was probably the middle of summer. No, it would have been probably late summer, early fall at this point. And I was like, yeah, they look good. They look pretty. I don't notice, I think she even asked me, do you see any imperfections in them? And we were probably, 10 or 15 feet away from the bush. And I said, no, I don't really see any. And then she called me over closer to the bush, and she pulled out one little branch, and there was little tiny leaves, like maybe half-inch leaves on this bush. And she's like, look closer at them now. Do you see imperfections and impurities, I guess you could say, on these leaves? And as I looked, I saw spots, and I saw leaves that were ripped and missing pieces, and just many imperfections in it. And so it really drove home the point to me that nothing is perfect, and even things that look beautiful, if you really get up in there and really look closely and examine them, you're going to find things that aren't perfect about them. So the lesson I took away, and I think the lesson Daisy was trying to share with me, was just that just get out there and get it done and move forward, and don't let perfectionism kill your creativity. You've got more to share than just this one song. Get it out there, keep practicing, keep reiterating, and keep moving forward. So that's something I want to share with you guys today, is don't let that kill you. So moving on, how do we harness creative motivation? Step one, I think we want to embrace curiosity. We want to ask a lot of questions. We want to explore new ideas. Creativity thrives when we're open and when we're curious, guys. The more we can be not so tight-fisted in how we think things should go, the better it will be. I'm learning that lesson right now in my podcast cohort. As I have finished week one, I asked for feedback on how it went, and I got a couple of responses back in the survey, and several people said they wanted to explore sharing more openly on the call with everybody, rather than kind of having a presentation and then working separately. And I think I've always shied away from that because I'm not sure how it's going to work out. I want to be more in control of how things are going to go. And so this second week, I just kind of really worked slowly and left a lot of room open on the floor for everybody to talk and have input. And it was beautiful. It was awesome. I think it was much more helpful to all the participants in the cohort. And so I guess what my takeaway there is, like, I just need to embrace, letting go of control, being more curious, and being more open to allowing things to happen rather than being so worried about what I'm going to do next. And I think that's why I don't like and why I try to be in control, is because I'm not sure what people are going to say and I'm not sure what's going to happen. And so I want to make sure that I'm going to be able to provide value instead of being open to, being curious and like, what's going to happen if I turn the floor open to some of these people and see what they say. I caught myself a few times while people were talking, like trying to think ahead and figure out what I was going to say, and before they were even done talking. And I'm trying to learn my lesson and stop that and just embrace curiosity, be in the moment with people, and be in the moment with what's going on and explore that. I think that's a great first step in our creative motivation. It's a little off topic as far as finding creativity, but it's an example that I have recently of how I'm trying to embrace that curiosity and try something in a new creative way for my podcast cohort. Step 2, and I think this one is so impactful. For me, it has been probably one of the most impactful things that's helped me a ton over the years, and that is to set boundaries around your creative work. You want to dedicate time and space for your creative process and protect it from distractions and set up rules around it. So for me, this was in 2019, I did this 12 Days of Christmas, and the rules I set up, I wanted to release some covers of some music. And the rules I set up for myself is that I'm going to release a cover Christmas song for 12 days from December 1st to December 12th. The rules that I have to follow is I only have 2 hours from start to finish to learn and arrange the song and record it. We only have 2 hours. And that was a huge deal for me because at the time when I wanted to do a cover, it might take me, 3 or 4 days to figure out what song and the arrangement and all this stuff. And I was like, man, this is it's killing me, because I'm trying to be too perfect. And this rule, step 2, setting boundaries around your creative work, kind of forces you to cut out perfectionism. So I want to encourage you guys to really try to dive into step 2. Step 3 is to find your why. I've been talking about that intrinsic value. I've been talking a lot with my podcast cohort group about this and about finding their why. If you don't know why you want a podcast, don't start until you have your why figured out. It's going to make things harder. Honestly, you'd be super transparent here because this is an open journal and a diary of my journey. It's been a struggle for me with keeping this podcast going, just in the sense that, like, here it is Monday again, and this topic of creativity. I've got a book that I want to read that I've read out of, Adorning the Dark by Andrew Peterson, and if I had my way, I would have wanted to go back and read that book again and really pull from that for this episode. But I haven't been able to. And so this podcast has been challenging for me to keep up with, in the sense that it seems like Monday, Tuesday morning comes so fast every week, and I'm always kind of behind the gun trying to figure out how to get ahead so that I have the time to put in the time that I want to and really dive into what I want to say here. And so, and today I was discouraged before I sat down, but knowing my why of what I'm trying to accomplish with this podcast is to inspire other people and to share my journey, I was like, you know what? I've got to keep going. I can't stop. I promised people 100 episodes. So there's a promise for 100 episodes. That's it. Intrinsic motivation to kind of build the fire for that extrinsic motivation to build the fire for the intrinsic motivation. And the intrinsic motivation is that my why, that I want to help people. And the way that I can help people right now is by being faithful to this and doing 100 episodes so that I can continue to get better, so that I can find better workflows, so that I can find better habits, so that I can share them with you guys, so that your lives can be easier as podcasters. And step 4 is celebrate your small wins. This one is also really huge because no matter how small each step forward is, it's a step closer to your goal. It doesn't matter how well this podcast episode comes off. This is another podcast episode that I can check off that I am one episode closer to 100 episodes. I'm one episode closer to working through my internship here in the world of podcasting. It doesn't even have to be that. It could be so much smaller than that. It could be celebrating the win that I figured out what the topic was for next week today, rather than waiting until, later this week or next Monday. Something like that. It could be as small as, I'm trying to think of a very small thing in the world of podcasting. It could be something as small as sitting down and readjusting your mic position so that you sound a little better on your podcast, or maybe finding a different camera angle. Find a win, celebrate it, and start building wins that push you towards your goal. All right, so we're getting close to the end here. The role of community and creativity, I think that the power of connection and creativity really thrives in a community setting. I know that this has helped me a lot. This is something I've thought a lot about probably the last week or so. Not necessarily for this episode, but I was just thinking about it and how my journey is that I've always wanted to be a songwriter. It's going to be a bummer for audio, but oh well. I've always wanted to be a songwriter and to write music that inspires other people, but it's always been challenging for me to figure out how to do that in the sense of figuring out the finances and everything with it, and just trying to do that by myself. I was thinking about it, and I was like, I always do much better if I have a client or somebody else, some kind of community aspect built in. And maybe I just never built the audience big enough to hold me accountable for music and ask me when more music was coming. I'm not sure, but I didn't really have that community there. As I'm growing and learning with the podcasting and having this podcast cohort every week, that really drives me, guys, to figure out things and to dive deeper into a lot of these topics that I'm talking with them about. And it's forcing me in a positive manner on how to better know and better understand these things so that I can help other people. Whereas if I was just had this podcast, I think it would be good, but there's not a lot of community around this podcast right now. Simply as there's not a lot of community around my music. So I think it would fall into a similar place. But having that cohort has been a blessing for me in the sense that it's just, I've surrounded myself with like-minded people who are interested in podcasting and who want to get better. And me as the host of that cohort every week, I have to bring something to the table to say, hey, let's talk about this week. This is the worksheet that we're going to work through. This is how we're going to try to get better at podcasting this week. And it's been super helpful. So if you don't have some kind of community that you're working towards your goals with in podcasting, I really want to encourage you to make sure that you have one. So as a wrap up this week on this episode, I apologize. I feel like I was rambling a bit, but I hope that you get the idea that creativity is a journey and it's not a destination. To quote my business coach from this week, he posted in one of the groups that I follow him in, and he talked about how it's not about where you're going to arrive at. It's about who you're going to become while you're on this journey. And so I want you, it is cool to think about what we can accomplish with our podcast, but the journey isn't really about that end goal that maybe we think about. A lot of times we're going to miss the creativity and the personal growth that we're going to have along the way, and just that it's not a destination, and then we're never really going to arrive. We're always going to be trying to creatively get better. But understanding some of these things, some of the barriers that we face, perfectionism, creative blocks, and then understanding some tools that can help us, like setting rules and setting restrictions around ourselves for creating, just counting our wins. These kind of things can help us overcome some of these things. So I just want to encourage you guys to stay on it, to not give up. And if you need help, here's your call to action today. If you want some help, I offer a 25-minute free brainstorming call, and I would love to get on a call with you and talk to you about the biggest problem that you're facing in your podcast right now and figure out a way to try to creatively solve that together in that 25 minutes. So there'll be a link down in the show notes. There'll be a link down there. So go grab a spot in my calendar and let's connect over Zoom and talk about your podcast for a little bit and see if we can move things forward for you. So until next time, guys, I just want to encourage you to stay creative and happy podcasting.